Nitin Sharma, the CEO and co-founder of REFO. Nitin, thank you so much for joining me here.
Pleasure to be here, Stacey. Big fan of your work. It's my pleasure to be here today.
I appreciate that. I'm also a big fan of yours and what you guys are doing at REFO. I'd love to dig in. First and foremost, REFO, if it's not a name that has been heard just yet here in the United States, pay attention because there is a lot going on with this organization here within the US, especially as it relates to 1033 or open banking. And we're going to get into that in just a few moments, Nitin, but I'd love to back things up for just a moment because REFO has made quite a name for itself already internationally, serving banks across many different countries. And the US is just the next stopping point in the journey of REFO. I'd love to just understand with you when you are talking about the platform itself. It's a platform that is extremely versatile in the use cases it serves, very workflow driven type of elements, but created to serve certain use cases. I'd love to know if you have found that these use cases translate across the countries and the FIs that you serve, or have you found that they're a bit more unique to each organization that you work with?
No, so I think basic fundamental concept remains the same, whichever country you go to, if it is about payments, money movement, or if somebody is looking for a loan, the basic fundamentals remain the same. The only thing that would be different would be some regulations around identity verification or the way you pull data, let's say in United States versus in the Southeast Asian countries. How do you pull data around bureau, banking, and also those data sources would change, but the basic principles are largely the same. That's our observation.
Speaking of the identity verification, that is an area in which you and your colleagues and your team members have focused quite a bit, especially with some of the US banks that you have been working with thus far. Can you tell me a little bit about what you're doing here in the US that you have found applicable and very much appreciated by the banks that you have created use cases for and working through right now?
Yeah. So see, our vision from REFO's perspective has been that we want banks to be the preferred platform for customers for their day-to-day transactions. And how that would happen is actually if you start embedding all the financial services that a bank typically offers into the day-to-day apps that a user is currently using. So that's our vision. So embedding financial services is our key forte into several different ecosystems. And when we were looking at several different platforms which are already there in the market, so it was always around workflows for branch operations or workflows for, let's say, an onboarding being done through a mobile or a laptop kind of a platform. But when it came to API-based acquisition, API-based workflows, we could not see much platforms there. And that's where we started building. We created this as a platform wherein you can actually create any workflow and deploy that as an API stack. So this is where we started. But at the same time, since this is the horizontal part of the platform, but so far what we have solved for largely is the retail use cases, whether it is consumer loans, payments, consumer credit cards, issuance, and even credit card servicing. These are 3 to 4 use cases that we have actually solved for. And the same use cases we brought to US. So we're currently doing pilots with 3 banks in US of very varying degree of the asset under management. And we see there is a lot of demand around that. How can we embed, let's say, a credit card origination stack to some of the third-party partners that a bank is currently working with. So these are some of the solutions that we are focused on at the moment.
And I know you're being somewhat humble because some of the US banks that you're working with right now, as you mentioned, differing asset sizes, some of those are very, very large asset sizes, and gentlemen, and they would be known providers, known names that everyone here would understand and be able to just readily pick out. I want to make certain that I illustrate the point, Nitin, that when I first spoke to you, got a chance to know you and the REFO team, I had this impression in my mind that REFO was mainly a workflow engine at its core, and it is in many regards, and it's beautifully written and constructed of the UI that I've been able to see and the elements that are built into the application. But when it comes down to it, there are a couple of different segments that you play in, both that are of interest to me. One that you mentioned is embedded banking. and with the embedded components where banks are embedding their services into fintech players. That is a perfect use case of what you've just illustrated with the identity component, the identity management verification aspects that were highlighted. But there is also this secondary use case that you've employed also around the world and here in the US, and that is outside of BaaS banking. So I want to make certain that everyone here looking and watching this particular video understands that REFO specializes in, of course, the embedded space, but also has many applications across the wider environment. And you've mentioned a few use cases. I understand you serve quite a few more out of the box, as well as work with those large logos that were mentioned previously to solve very niche, very specific needs in their own business model as well. So there's quite a bit, and don't leave the words in your mouth. You correct me where I'm going off the rails here, Nitin, but there's quite a bit that you all do right out of the box in a productized fashion with use cases in each of these market segments. There's also quite a bit that you do for each particular FI that needs REFO to solve a need for them. They might not be able to tackle with their existing tech stack. Would that be true to say?
Absolutely. So, Stacey, what we found embedded banking or banking as a service was one of the hot topics everywhere. And this was one of the unmet need, both from the point of the consumer and also one from the point of view from the banks. So this is something which, whenever we go to banks, this is something which strikes very quickly between the need and what we offer. And hence, most of our implementations today are on that side. Having said that, you rightly said, what we have built is actually a workflow platform through which you actually build banking flows, whether it is around customer onboarding or customer servicing across multiple classes. So you can actually do a lot more through the platform. But today, from a focus perspective, we have been delivering a lot around retail use cases. And within that, embedded banking, banking as a service, or open banking remains the key focus area for us.
That's fantastic. I appreciate you offering that color, Nitin, because I agree with you. I think open banking, embedded banking as well, both very hot topics here in the US, especially the open banking. I think every banker, probably every fintech founder watching this has heard of that. If not, please, let's all educate ourselves a bit on embedded banking, open banking. Check out 1033. Embedded banking a bit more specialized as well, and an area in which REFO shines. Want to make sure everyone understands that and can dig deeper into REFO's offering along those lines. Nitin, I'd like to take that and expand just a little bit, because here in the US especially, I mentioned 1033, which brings to mind regulatory challenges. The banks that you have worked with here in the US, are there any specific type of regulatory challenges they're trying to meet? Is it around 1033, or are there other use cases right now that you and the team have been working on and solving for?
So there are several. I think from a regulations perspective, the regulations overall has been changing, whether it is 1071 or 1033, there have been a lot of changes that have come up. So, but 1033 being, because we work in that particular space, hence whenever we go to a particular customer, they always talk about 1033 with us. And then a lot is around data privacy of particular customers. So when we talk about, let's say, identity and all, then how the data privacy is being maintained of these customer is another topic that we hear a lot, and that we have done a lot of provisions in our platform as well. But in our space, I'll be honest, it's largely 1033 that we hear a lot. And around that, we have primarily done most of our work.
Oh my goodness. Well, it is the hot topic now, including entire events in the industry spinning up around 1033 and this open banking concept. So absolutely a hot topic. When you think about your use cases, I'm going to step back and I'm going to take things in another direction, because it's early in the morning for me, and my coffee hasn't kicked in for me to go in one direction. So I have so much I want to ask you about. But I guess I'm wondering here. There's different use cases you solve. At the heart, there's the orchestration of business processes and automation that REFO brings to the table. Have there been any particular data or infrastructure problems that you have found bankers needing to solve for?
Absolutely. And thanks for actually asking that question, because I can actually relate very well to this, because there is one large bank that we have been currently working with. And the biggest problem that they today have is, and most of the other banks also, is how do you handle unstructured data coming from several different heterogeneous sources and make sense of that data? And how do you do that in a scalable manner so that, for example, today I added, let's say, 10 sources of data into the platform and I could make sense of that quickly. But tomorrow, if I want to add, let's say, 5 more data sources into it, can I do this in a repeatable fashion, in a scalable fashion? Most of the banks today, and I'm talking about one of the very large banks that we are talking to currently, and currently they don't have that kind of infrastructure. They have done something, but that is very rigid today. That requires a lot of work to make it flexible. And there is a lot of now opportunity that has opened up with the technologies like LLM models, generative AI, and all, which we have implemented into our product, which helps any chief data officer or a chief information officer to quickly stitch any new data pipeline into their banking workflows. So, for example, let's say today I want to consume data coming from DoorDash about the kind of rides the riders are actually doing, and on a daily basis, what is their receivables looking like. And once I get that data, how can I use that data to underwrite some kind of a credit line to these drivers, or a gig economy kind of a loan? How can I stitch that very quickly? So these are the kind of things that banks today are not equipped with handling this kind of problem around heterogeneous data, and then standardizing that, and then making sense of that to actually create a new product on the fly. And that is where we have done a lot of work. But this is a very common theme that has come, and especially in context to embedded banking or open banking, this problem is very prominent. Because see, if you just compare it to branches, right? So when a customer comes to you in a branch, you typically have a very standardized form that you would ask them to fill. You know, these are the 10 fields that the customer would fill in. And basis that data, I would have certain rules that I would run on top of it. But when you're working now, your customers are actually changing. For a bank, the customer is changing from a person to maybe an application. So DoorDash developers are going to be your customers in future. Or let's say Uber would be one of the customer, which is actually bringing, let's say, drivers or consumers as customers to a bank. And they would be sharing a lot of data. They would be willing to share a lot of data. One use case that we also discussed very recently, and you might have heard about it. Tesla also launched a real-time insurance right into the car. Sitting into the car, you can actually get a new insurance done through the Tesla dashboard. All of that is possible because of the embedded play. But it would only happen if you have the capability to consume this kind of data and actually make sense of all of this data that is coming through. So data is going to be a massive problem for all the FI in the next 1 decade, and also an opportunity at the same time.
So true. And to add a little bit of color to this, as I think back over my career, there were aspects of my career where I would sell reporting or data analytics solutions. And there was always a challenge in integrating those solutions because it did require an integration into those solutions. And actually, they required more of a data dictionary as well that would translate information from system A into the visibility to where it could be picked up by a particular BI tool or analytics tool. Same
Yeah.
thing for system B, for system C. It wasn't easy to do. It required a great deal of effort and energy. And sometimes it was the lowest priority when it
Yeah.
came to getting a product launched, making it consumable, the data consumable to a solution like that. And that's
Yeah.
that's not because these companies didn't want to do it. It was just difficult to do. So I think any type of solution that unlocks information and data, especially the unstructured data, as you mentioned, in a way that allows it to be consumed across a tech stack is going to be powerful. Because we now live in a day and age in banking where we're starting to see more and more vendor diversity in the banking space, meaning there are more and more banks and credit unions that are looking beyond their core system provider, or they find they want to play in more fintech areas. They want to start looking at banking as a service, all of which requires that they should want to get their hands on data. I know they do. A solution like REFO democratizes that data for them and allows it to be used in very unique ways. And that Uber example, a driver loan type of scenario is a perfect example of how data can be used to empower a financial institution and ultimately their customers and members as a result.
Absolutely. And I think one thing I just want to add, so to your point, see, earlier it might be only around that you can maybe service a customer better if you could crunch the data well, or it could be around maybe doing some kind of cross sell or reporting. But now the things have changed a lot. Your acquisition or doing new business is entirely dependent on how well you can actually consume new set of data. Another example that is coming to my mind is on the e-space. And we recently did a report on that as well, wherein another term actually for BaaS, but it's called as battery as a service, wherein now the OEMs of the cars, they are putting batteries into the vehicle as a service rather than giving it on a capital expenditure. They're trying to make it more OPEX driven. The way it works is it is technically underlying instrument is a loan from a lender itself who is actually financing that particular battery. But the EMIs are totally driven on the number of kilometers a particular person would do in a particular month. So if you do more kilometers, your EMI is going to be higher for that particular month. If you do less kilometers, your EMI is going to be lower. So imagine a world where you're getting a constant stream of data basis that your EMIs are actually changing. Do you think most of the banks today are ready for that? I think that's where you need that kind of agility and flexibility, which we know, I think, what is the strength of any of the cores today that exist in any part of the world. They are known for managing the ledgers really, really well and doing standardized products. But that's where there is a space of platforms like REFO or any other middleware who would sit in front of these cores and would help bankers to actually leverage this data and actually use this to their advantage and create dynamic products very quickly so that they can partner with newer ecosystems.
And this is one of the reasons I always love speaking to you, Nitin. I feel that my worldview, or at least my knowledge of use cases, is broadened as a result because you are so wise and so learned, and you play and pay attention across different markets and use cases and then apply them where it makes sense in different markets. So that is something I struggle to even fathom how a lender in today's US market might accomplish a usage-based type of lending product based on their current tech stack. But having that data come in and be able to be consumed and be able to be used not only to make decisions, as you mentioned, but to actually establish now a billing mechanism is phenomenal to think through.
Yeah.
I hadn't even considered or known about that use case previously. So thanks for bringing that to my attention, kind sir. Well, I do have a question. I know our time is limited here today, but I am interested to know from you, as a co-founder and a CEO, is there a lesson that you have learned from launching REFO that you can help somebody else that's coming up with sharing some knowledge? What would you say if you have something?
Well, there are so many lessons, of course, that you get, when you are building any company.
Yeah.
Just thinking which one would be most relevant. But I think I'll just talk about the time. I think the time it takes to build something. There are only few things that you can actually really push hard for them to actually happen. But there are few things for which you will just have to wait at times. So, and that's actually true when you're working with banks. At times we become impatient that things are not moving or things are moving quite slow. But you have to understand, I think, that there is a set speed at which basically things would happen. So beyond a point, there is no actually incremental gain by pushing too hard onto a particular thing. So that has been one of the key learnings. So what we do just to find a solution, not entirely a solution, but what we try to do is maybe have as many conversations as we can have with multiple potential customers. And we know that each one of them would move at their own pace. And there is a limited pull or limited push you can actually make on each of those customers to move forward. That has been one of the key learnings. And that's the same thing that we keep discussing internally also. And we prepare our team also to learn that how the world would move in this particular kind of business.
It's so valid because in the fintech space, we're used to moving quickly. We're
Yeah.
adaptable, we're agile, we're used to iterating quickly. And banks, they have a lot on their plate, for one thing, and they
Yeah.
have a lot of regulatory concerns and just vendor due diligence. There's a lot of reasons, I guess, for them to be conservative and to slow down the pace with
Right.
a technology like REFO or any other technology. But it's a period of go fast to get the product out from the fintech side, slow down to sell to banks. But boy, when they are ready and they have signed an agreement, you've got to be ready to go fast again. And they
That's true.
cannot be waiting on a fintech. So there's there's very much emotion that comes into play, and it's fast, slow, fast, at least that I have seen in my world. So I think that's an excellent lesson for any fintech founder, anyone that's wanting to even consider starting a fintech or selling to banks. The motion will be what it is, and just be ready for it wherever it is.
Yeah. One more thing related to that, I just want to add. 2 months into my journey, when I started this company, one of our advisor, they told us that typically when you work with fintechs, they are looking for something very jazzy or something very new that they can actually showcase to the world. But when you go to banks, they're not looking for anything jazzy. They're looking for something which is extremely robust. And that changed our perspective completely. And right from the beginning, then we focused completely on, we understood, I think, why banks typically want robustness of a particular solution rather than just moving extremely quickly or having something super jazzy. So that's what we have built from day one into our platforms, and how do we keep it more robust, more secure, and make it to the standard of a bank grade technology. Because we understand, from the view that they come from, the kind of responsibilities they have, and the kind of AUM that they are actually managing. So this was one key learning that one of our advisors gave, and that actually proved out to be very true when we went ahead into the journey.
It's so valid. I have worked with fintech. They feel like they just need to get an MVP out there just
Yeah.
to get something out there. And I don't want to discourage everyone from putting their work out into the world.
Sure.
But to your point, when it comes to being in front of a bank is going to expect a well-baked, a secure solution.
Absolutely.
They're going to expect a compliant solution. They're going to expect a solution where you've thought through audit trails and reporting. If you don't have those at the time of launch as a bare minimum, you will likely hear that, come back to us whenever you have these components or when you
Correct.
get the next version of your solution. So that advisor was spot on with the advice.
Yeah.
All right, Nitin, I know we're here at time, and it has been so gracious of you to provide this time to all of us. I feel wiser already. But where can people find REFO? Where can they find you? I know you have an upcoming trip, I believe, is it to the city, to New York?
Yeah. It's in May, in mid of the May, I'm going to be there.
Okay, fantastic. And what is the name of that event? Is it the GIP?
It's a collab between FDX and an organization called as Openfinity. So it's
Yes.
all about open banking and open finance, and we are participating in that event, and we're going to be presenting there.
And Nitin Sharma, you can connect with him out on LinkedIn. And the company's website, is it REFO? Is it
Yes, it's refo.dev. Yes.
refo.dev. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a gentleman to watch. As you can tell, he's not only very wise, very humble, which is such a fantastic combination in a person in general, also in a person that's playing in the banking market. Makes it so enjoyable to speak to you, Nitin. But also just pay attention to the REFO name, because you're going to hear much more from them. They are out to make everyone's lives better, bankers' lives, end users' lives, but also the fintechs and other players that come into your ecosystem that you play with. Nitin, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate you, kind sir, and I hope to see you in New York or somewhere else very, very soon.
Thank you so much, Stacey, for all the kind words. You definitely raised a lot of confidence in us, and it was my pleasure to have a conversation with you today.